Hello, uh, I'm Dr. Farooq Arif. I'm an associate professor at the Department of Civil Engineering at NED University. Today, I'm going to present my paper for the conference. First of all, I would like to thank the conference organizers to provide me the opportunity to present this virtually. Of course, this is the new normal. So hopefully the presentation would be liked by all the audience, and I would appreciate if there are any questions and I can be reached for the questions uh, through various means with regards to the research that I'm going to present in this particular video conference presentation. So, in this sixth international project and construction management e-conference, which is EIPCMC 2020, I'm going to present my paper titled Potential of BIM for Decision Making in Public Infrastructure Organizations of Pakistan, that is assessment through ICT practices. Um, as I introduce myself, I'm an associate professor at the NED University of Engineering Technology. My co-author in this paper is Dr. Nida Azhar. She is an assistant professor at the Department of Urban and Infrastructure Engineering at NED University. This is the presentation outline. I'll go through the brief introduction, the aims and objectives of this small research, then conceptual information flow model. I'll discuss that, organization and respondents profile, which were basically surveyed and interviewed with for the sake of collecting information and ICT practices, assessment of BIM adoption potential, and then conclusions and recommendations. So you know that BIM can be useful for improving the quality and effectiveness of decision making in infrastructure management organizations. The simple reason is because it is information modeling and it can integrate a lot of scattered information into one model, which can be utilized by the decision makers for various decision making perspectives, whether it be at the local level or at the strategic level, where the financial arrangements of infrastructure development and maintenance is to be conducted. However, the BIM utilization for such practice, that is for infrastructure decision making, has been limited. Rather, to put it in correct terminology, it is under evolution. Now, according to the concept of technology acceptance, which is that the technology is adopted well by an individual or a firm if it is perceived to be number one, useful, and number two, easy to use. Now, you might be wondering how these two terminologies are different. Now, being useful is that from the industry perspective or from professional perspective, it is useful enough to draw conclusions, to draw results for the practical implications and practical implementation of such technology. The easy to use is whether or not such organization can adopt or adapt to the change that may be caused by introduction or such technology intervention. Now, therefore, it becomes very important to assess the adoption potential of any organization, in this case, public infrastructure management organization, for effective BIM utilization. And the very uh, hypothesis behind this is if a company, if an organization, that is public infrastructure management organization, is well versed or at least advanced to the level where the information technology practices, or what we call as information and communication technology practices, are at par level, then the BIM adoption for the sake of infrastructure management decision making would be rather easier in such organizations. Now, so that is what drives the aims and objectives of this particular research. The study aims to assess the readiness, and that is the key word, the readiness of the BIM adoption for decision making specifically in infrastructure management organizations, and it seeks to identify the perception about the adoption potential for decision making organizations as well. So there are two things. One is the readiness, and the other is their perception about the adoption of such technology, that is such tool, that is BIM, into the domain of infrastructure decision making. Now, when we reviewed the literature, so through the literature review, it was very important to identify what is actually the information flow in infrastructure decision making, because you know that building information modeling or information modeling for the sake of infrastructure projects would first, at first we need to ascertain what are the information requirements, how they are integrated together, and how the flow of information takes place in or from the perspective of infrastructure decision making only. You know that in any infrastructure project development or its maintenance, it starts with feasibility, goes on towards the engineering design phase, then the detailed design happens, then the procurement phase, because traditionally they are owned by the public procurement regulations or public procurement authorities, construction phase, and then startup and project closeout. So basically, these are the stages of the construction project of any project develop, or rather project development process of any infrastructure development project or public infrastructure development project. Within these, each of these phases, there is what we call as factors where information flow may happen. It includes scope, feasibility. For example, in case of feasibility, it includes scope, feasibility, and conceptual evaluation. While let me pick another one in which construction phase, for example, the factors that can be addressed through or the factors that basically have some kind of information flow are related to submittals, RFIs, and overview and management. These are the factors that basically, or there might be sub factors, as in the case of construction phase, that combinedly would lead towards a decision. For example, if we talk about procurement phase, so procurement phase would lead to decisions about the resource planning and BOQ development. That is the bid document development or tender documents development. Now, in that, we would need to have tender floating, bid documents, contract award processes involved, and these are the factors. If they are done through building information modeling or any information technology mechanism, then there is a potential for such thing to happen. And all the green ones in this slide are basically those factors, and the gray ones are the phases, and ultimately lead towards the decision. Now, when we decide upon, okay, or when the literature, which through various published work and as well as inquiring through the infrastructure management organization, this is the process or information flows conceptual model which was established. And according to that, the further evaluation of different infrastructure management organizations in Pakistan was conducted. Now, with regards to that, what we did was that we went through different organizations and had detailed interviews and structured interviews, as we call it, with the different personnel involved at different level of decision making in that organization. It starts with the public university, highway authority, that is at national level, works and services departments of different organizations, water supply, um, basically water supply infrastructure, the water companies, the gas supply company, the public infrastructure planning and development, port authority, and public schools. Now, all these, of course, for the sake of secrecy, have not been actually named, but each one of these organizations, whether they were handling public infrastructure management and development at the national level or at the provincial level in the province of Sindh, from where I belong. Now, the infrastructure under those were mainly, of course, related to their domain of work. For example, public universities as educational facilities, mainly building, while infrastructure development and planning has mass transportation system under it. Utility infrastructure was under the gas and water supply, and likewise, highway authority had roads and offices, and even their um, office buildings. The respondents are also listed here. Majority of the respondents had ample amount of experience. By responding, I mean that we did went to the director levels mainly, or at least the managerial level, and had structured interviews with them. Some of them had vast experience. For example, works and services had more than 30 years of experience, so as water supply personnel and infrastructure planning and development. So basically, they were well aware of how different processes with regards to what I discussed in the previous slides were being conducted at different at their particular organizations. Now, the first aspect was use of ICT for project planning decision functions. So if you look at this spread, which is mentioned through the uh, or which is illustrated through the table. For example, in public universities, the the main functions, the communication models were, they had an organizational portal, emails, fax, etc., video conferencing. These were the major tools of ICT that were being utilized for project planning and decision functions. Now, within that, the estimates, for example, were being developed using CAD models or spreadsheets, and mapping mainly Google Earth for utility infrastructure specifically, as I remember, and design softwares were being used for the sake of designing works. So they had a kind of good acceptability towards technology because they uh, had the uh, technology use already embedded within their project planning and decision functions. Likewise, if we talk about, for example, port authority or infrastructure planning and development, they were not using design softwares mainly because they were subletting the design things, and the vetting part of that was only being done at such organizations. So in a sense, they were not obliged to use those things because of their current function of project planning and decision. But they, some of them, say, even port authority, for example, for the purpose of their mapping support, they were using Google Earth and ArcMap and ArcView. Uh, Now you might be wondering why these only functions were selected with regards to the project planning and decision functions, because these are the main functions which can lead towards the adoption of building information modeling for infrastructure management project. Infrastructures, public infrastructure are mainly when they have to be modeled, they have to be modeled with proper geolocation. Otherwise, if they are not, then in longer term, such models could not be integrated with each other. So when we talk about infrastructure management, specifically surface transportation infrastructure or utility lines, uh, BIM or building information modeling is supposed to be better utilized in conjunction with GIS, that is geographical information system. And hence, all these functions were evaluated considering the same. Moving on, the use of ICT for monitoring and review of the decision functions. So, for example, when you want to review something and monitor something, project development aspect, your bids, etc. So, data evaluation, if you see, all the organizations did not have any data evaluation platform, which was alarming. And in another sense, if it is alarming, but it is an opportunity for BIM to come in as well, because BIM could be utilized for many aspects of data evaluation, specifically during the bidding phase and later on during the progress monitoring as well. I myself have been involved in different studies, conduct of different studies, where the progress monitoring of buildings, of infrastructure could be directly monitored, or directly what we call as survey BIM cloud interaction, where the geodatically correct and data driven models could be generated in BIM by integrating the data set coming out of the survey, physical survey, through the cloud. So, in a sense, the data evaluation, which is not being done, can be an opportunity for BIM to cover up this lacking in infrastructure management organizations. Now, information exchange, how they basically communicate. So most of them were paper based, and this is a typical scenario. The world is going paperless. Even if they were if they were being supported by electronic means, for example, still it was like scanned documents were being exchanged, or as a secondary mechanism of information exchange, the electronic mechanisms were being used, like email, or uh, maybe through kind of WhatsApp or any other messaging mechanism. Cost analysis, some of the organizations were doing it through the consultants, but majority of them were doing it manually. And you know that one dimension of BIM is cost and schedule. You can combine it, which can lead towards a better cost analysis for both as planned as well as built structures. And when you combine the latest technology for generating data driven models in BIM, the as built structure can directly give you cost analysis for whatever have been done from the perspective of progress monitoring. Sustainability wise, there exists typically no system. So if I go by the aspects, the monitoring and review decision function, which is the key aspect in any infrastructure management organization, was the weakest one in terms of ICT use. And here, the BIM and its supporting its supporting technology interventions can go a long way in reorganizing the function of monitoring and reviewing decisions for the infrastructure management organizations. Moving on, for maintenance repair operations, many of the um, organizations were, if you look at the manually thing, for example, for inspection data. So inspection was being done manually. Likewise, budget allocation was being done manually. By manually, it means that it was more of an economic task rather than going deeper into the uh, detailed requirements of budget allocation in, say, for example, network of infrastructure. Now, some of the organizations, based on their specific needs, for example, Highway Authority was using HDM, which is a US-based system. And then, for example, public schools were using MS Project for planning and budget allocation, budget loaded, or you can say resource allocated planning. However, many of the organizations were doing it manually, which is again on one side is alarming, but on the other side it provides us the opportunity to intervene with BIM, where the building information modeling or information modeling for infrastructure management can go a long way in providing integrated budget allocated decision making for the organizations. Likewise, for inspection data, if in if as built models, whether it be through laser scanning mechanisms, whether it be through survey enabled mechanisms, or whether the as built are developed using physical measurement and then transforming data to build as built models, it can go a long way in archiving the inspection related and condition related data of different infrastructure as well, and that would help to digitize such decisions and such decision making evidence, which can go a long way. So basically, if I conclude, and let me go to each of the aspects. From planning and decision functions, we can see that ICT intervention is significant. The ways could be different, but design works, of course, are not being conducted in many of the public infrastructure organizations. Only vetting works are being done for the design. So basically, those works could be intervened as well. For example, vetting purposes. But when we and for that regards, the infrastructure management organizations could ask for by the consultants to develop the designs using the BIM technology, and hence the archiving of the design and utilization of such models in future can become very fruitful. Moving on, when we talk about data evaluation as well as cost analysis, these are the two aspects in monitoring and reviewing the decisions perspective or decision function of infrastructure management organization, where BIM can help the infrastructure development and management organizations in the long way. Likewise, if we talk about maintenance and repair, there is a huge room in terms of as-built models, considering the inspection-based data and budget allocation specifically for BIM. So 5 different functions within the major functions of ICT use could be identified for BIM intervention, which is a big room for adoption or big potential for BIM adoption for various decision-making aspects. Now, to conclude from a macro level perspective, the overall potential of BIM adoption was unsupported. The reason is that there are two aspects, as I explained in my introductory slide as well. One is the being useful, and the other one is being the case where it is adaptable for the organization. Now, from being useful, it is definitely useful, but from being the organization being supportive, it is unsupportive. The reason is that many of the aspects where BIM can intervene are being done manually without the use of ICT or any such technology. At functional level, we can based on the structured interviews, we can mark that partially and moderately the organizations are ready for project planning purpose because they were better in that, and for monitoring and review, they are not ready at all. Because in the key aspects in monitoring and review, which were data evaluation as well as the cost analysis part, are being done manually. And there they would need a lot of training for BIM adaptation, for first of all conceiving that thing and then getting trained for such intervention. And finally, for maintenance and repair, they are moderately ready because some of the organizations are using some kind of database system, like for example, highway organization. But from the overall perspective, you can say that adoption would take a lot of training and a lot of awareness among these organizations. Organizations at the moment were seen to be they seem to be an unconsciousness of the benefits and utilization of the BIM. And in order to make that awareness, in order to make that convert that unconsciousness into consciousness of the benefits, many case studies have to be done. Some of which we, from my perspective, we have done. For example, for bridge infrastructure management decision making, where the bridge inspection could be done using BIM not only, but VR. At least the training of the inspectors could be done utilizing that, and archiving and digitizing of the bridge data could be done. Likewise, the geodatically placed models of public infrastructure. I worked with a company in US where we basically went ahead of the BIM and we integrated the data set for a grand bus station, service station, that is, for the state of Connecticut, and we integrated the geographical data which was evaluated, which was collected through point cloud data from using drone data, and it was integrated with the BIM data for better visualization of that facility, as well as for making decisions of that facility as built model, that is, in not only BIM but to go ahead in virtual reality. And finally, the conclusion: to make the process of decision making more efficient, BIM based decision support frameworks shall be adapted because there is a lot of room in terms of usefulness. Now, what are the recommendations? Number one, we have to prepare. If some organization basically want to adopt it, so we have to prepare a flow chart to determine each step of a candidate project, just like we did it for conceptual information flow. Then determine how the BIM could increase the efficiency of different functions and different decision-making functions within that flow chart, within that process flow chart. And then you should do some experimental implementation of BIM in order to see, to visualize the usefulness. That is the technology adoption mechanism, which would not be under pressure from the requirements set by the government, for example, but at least it would be some way forward. Once you do that, then the results of such thing should be disseminated among the organizational members so that they can look forward, and maybe they would be willing to adopt it much more in other decision functions as well. So that is the 4-point recipe to start with, based on the current condition of public infrastructure management organization with regards to BIM. And this 4-point recipe can lead to a long way in revolutionizing the way the information modeling is done in infrastructure projects, specifically in the area of in where this study has been conducted, that is public organizations, public infrastructure management organizations in Pakistan. So once again, I would like to thank the organizers of this conference, the 6th International Project and Construction Management E-Conference, its chairs, as well as its host ITU and its partners Me2 and other universities. Thank you very much for providing me the opportunity to present my work, and hopefully we will see each other in person in near future. Thank you.